Hi, welcome to Yoga Selection. My name is Rod. Today's class we're focusing on adho, mukha, vrksasana, on handstand. We'll be looking at some of the preparatory poses. We'll be working with the action of kicking up into the full handstand, and we'll also look at some ways of refining the final position once you're able to kick up and into it. In terms of equipment, importantly, you'll need a wall. You'll need a clear wall space, so you might need to move some furniture away from either side of your mat. And in one of the variations, I'll be using a yoga bolster. Some of you might have a yoga bolster. If you don't, see if you can improvise with a firm cushion. All right, we'll get started, and let's begin in virasana forward. So kneeling pose, come down to kneeling, have your big toes together touching, your knees apart, walking your hands forwards. Just before we release the head down, look at your hands, check that your wrists are shoulder width. So the same hand position that we'll use for a handstand eventually, your fingers spreading and the middle finger of the hand, the longest of the fingers, pointing directly forwards. And then letting your forehead release towards the floor. More important, of course, that your hips make contact with your heels. So press your hips back and down, then bring attention to your arms. As you press your hands down, straighten your elbows. Generally, they'll need to lift a little in order to fully straighten. And then keeping your hands pressing down, keeping your elbows straight, move your hips back and down. See if you can bring your hips past your heels and press your hips back and down beyond the heels. And just feel the nice length that occurs now from the hands through the arms, through the shoulder region, all the way to the waist. It's as if the arms reach as far back as the pelvis, rather than stopping and starting, as we more logically know, from the shoulder region. So really important as we're heading towards handstand to get that sense in the body of the arms being able to connect right back through the shoulders all the way to the hips. Let's come up now, and with that in mind, standing facing the wall, let's have the hands to the wall with the heels of the hands at hip height. And again, same hand position, the wrists shoulder width, your fingers spreading, the middle finger of each hand pointing directly upwards. And then step your feet back, make a simple right angle shape with the body. Again, we'll eventually look down at the floor, but just for the moment, lift your head so that you can see your hands. Check that your fingers are spreading. Again, the middle finger of each hand pointing directly upwards. And then let your gaze come down to the floor, your ears align with your upper arms. Press your hands firmly into the wall, elbows straight. And again, the elbows often, they'll need to lift a little away from the floor in order to straighten. So keeping the elbows straight, keeping your hands pressing into the wall, move your back ribs down more towards the floor. And pressing your hands into the wall, lifting your elbows up, move your hips back and away from the wall, as if someone was standing behind you and pulling your hips directly back and away from the wall. And as we do that, just feel it, that nice integrated long line from the hands through the shoulder region, reaching all the way back to the hips. Before we release from the pose, front thighs press back, and heels press firmly down and into the floor. Let's just have a brief break from the pose. We'll step forward. Just keep your hands to the wall, just to give your arms an opportunity to refresh again. And then this time, let's come back to the pose. But rather than having the feet apart, have your feet together. So we've started with our awareness of our arms and how our arms connect to the torso. Also important with a handstand that we think about what the legs are doing. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep the left foot where it currently is to the floor, whilst raising the right leg up and back so that the right leg comes parallel to the floor. Just notice that the right buttock, it's involved, it needs to firm in order to lift the leg up. Keep the right knee straight. Be really clear with that. The kneecap, firm it. And from the right inner groin to the right inner heel, that whole line of the leg, lengthen it out and away from the wall. Press into the wall with your hands as you lengthen the leg back and away from the wall. And then lower the right foot down and raise the left leg up. Just make sure that your hips are level. Common here for the right hip to drop as the left leg raises up. So right outer hip lift, keeping your hips level. Straighten the left knee. Be really clear there. Open the back of the knee. Grip the kneecap and open the back of the left knee. Imagine someone holding your left ankle and firmly pulling the ankle out and away from the wall. As you do that, as you imagine that, press your hands still more firmly into the wall. Okay, and then lower the foot down and step forwards and come up. So just looking to the screen. This position will now, as we head a little closer to the actual handstand, we're going to turn this pose upside down. So where our hands are will be where our feet will be, and we're currently where we're standing with our feet, that's where we'll be placing our hands. Let's first of all measure the correct distance that our hands need to be away from the wall. It's roughly a leg's length. Good to start initially with a leg's length. Some people might need a little bit more than that. For no one will you need less than a leg's length distance. So sitting to the floor, feet to the wall, knees straight. Take note of where you're sitting and just feel it, where the sitting bones are impacting on the mat. That's the section of the mat where you want to place the heels of your hands. So let's head there now. We'll turn around the other way and we're placing our hands down in that section of the mat where our sitting bones have just been. So that gives us roughly a leg's length. Maybe just watch me come into the pose first of all, and then we can all go into it together. So we start here. First of all, just finding the wall with the heels. That way you know literally where the wall is. From there, we're aiming to bring the chest in as close as possible to the wall. So I lift my hips up in order to get in closer to the wall with my chest. Notice as I do that, I'm lengthening through my shoulders. And I want to maintain this position with the torso while stepping up the wall. It means that the foot that initially steps up the wall, it needs to do so with the knee really bent. So here I've stepped that foot up the wall. The ankle will be roughly hip height. And I'm staying in close to the wall with my chest. I press that foot into the wall and bring the other foot up to meet it. And I make a right angle shape. Okay, let's try it. So hands a leg's length distance away from the wall. Check that your wrists are shoulder width and your fingers spreading. And then step your feet back so that your heels find the wall. At this point, it's a little bit like a shortened downward facing dog pose. Press your hands down with your elbows straight. Lift your hips up. As your hips lift up, move your chest in closer to the wall. With your eyes now, you're looking at the wall there in between the shins. Now, without dropping your hips, it doesn't matter which leg leads, one will naturally lead. Step it up the wall. It needs to be a big step so that we straight away come to hip height. And then pressing your hands down, pressing that foot into the wall, step the other foot up so that you have both of the feet to the wall. Hands press down, elbows straight, lift your hips up, press your thighs up, press your heels back into the wall, and then release down. So it might be that your wrists are finding that quite uncomfortable, and in which case the thing to do is just to come that little bit further away from the wall with your hands. And it might, if that is the case, just take some time for your wrists to get used to that weight-bearing position, an ideal preparatory pose to just gradually, at your own pace, work towards doing a full handstand. The other thing that might be happening there is that you may be unable to straighten your knees, or your feet might feel as if they're sliding on the wall. If that is the case, for either of those things, you can just come a little bit further away from the wall. Work in increments of the length of your own hand, the distance from the heel of the hand to the fingertips. So you can just increase your distance. Try one handspan further out from the wall. If you're working with tighter hamstrings and stiffer shoulders, it might even be that you need to be 2 hands distance further out. Important that you can press your heels back into the wall. If your heels are coming off the wall, it's an indicator that you need to take a little bit more distance away from the wall and not walk as high up the wall. Let's try again. So fingers spreading, wrists shoulder width, elbows straight, and then lift your pelvis up, up and back so that your chest moves in closer to the wall. Pressing the floor down with your hands, lifting your hips up and back, and then bent knee as we step up the wall, bringing both feet to the wall. Make sure that your heels can make a firm contact with the wall. So pressing your heels into the wall, lifting your thighs up, lifting your pelvis up, pressing your hands down and into the floor. Okay, and then release down, and we'll use this pose. Look to the screen if you're not sure. Uttanasana, just as opposed to release, let the neck relax, the head hang, and let the arms refresh. So a good pose for building arm strength so that you feel confident to be able to eventually kick up into a full handstand. Also a good pose for just getting accustomed to being upside down. For some people that can take some time to become familiar with that orientation of being upside down. And just to get us that little bit more in an upside down position, this time we'll come back to the pose, but we'll be stepping our feet higher than hip height. This time it will mean that the heels of the feet will be off the wall. It will just be the toes, maybe a little bit of the ball of the foot that will be in contact with the wall. Let's try it. So same hand position, fingers spreading, wrists shoulder width, elbows straight. Step your feet back, find the wall with your heels, lift your hips up, bring your chest in close to the wall. Step up the wall. We'll just come initially back to that first position of having the ankles hip height, but then continue to walk each foot further up the wall, maybe a foot or so, 30 centimeters or so higher up. Toes press into the wall. Make sure that you're not dropping the back of your pelvis. Lift the back of your pelvis up, press your hands down, and lifting the hips as high as possible upwards towards the ceiling. Okay, and then release down. Neck release, excuse me, and head hang. So that just gets us a little bit more familiar with the upside down orientation. Something else that can be good there, we'll come back to the first variation where we step the feet up to hip height, and then we'll be raising one leg at a time. Now, possible to do it both legs in the one attempt at stepping up the wall, but we might today break it down so that we'll step up the wall and we'll extend the right leg first, we'll come down, have a brief rest, we'll step up again and then extend the left leg. Okay, be ready, hands in position. Find the wall with your heels, stepping back, hips up, chest in towards the wall. Step up the wall, ankles to hip height. Have your feet together so that your big toes and inner heels are touching. Leave the left foot as it is, raise the right leg up towards vertical without dropping the left hip. Pressing the hands down, the inside of the right leg, lengthen it upwards towards the ceiling, as if you were being picked up by that top ankle and lifted towards the ceiling. Foot back to the wall, step down the wall, and we'll have a brief rest in Uttanasana. I'm keeping my hands to the floor. You might not be comfortably reaching the floor with your hands, in which case just have your hands to your shins. Make sure your neck is releasing, relaxing, and your head hanging.
Try to make the pose as tall as possible here. We'll be extending the left leg up and use the whole left leg like a handle for the pose to lift the pose in an upward direction against the effect of gravity. Let's go. So feet walk back, hips up, chest towards the wall, step up the wall, keep the feet together, and now raise the left leg up to vertical. Hands pressed down, keep your elbows straight, and lift the left leg up. Use the left leg to lift the whole body in an upward direction. Make the left big toe base lift up, the left inner heel lift up, and then stepping the feet back down the wall and have a rest for a moment in Uttanasana. All right, so for the moment, focusing on the arms, that sense of getting orientation when the body is in an upside down position. And even though the pose is named a handstand, it's very much dependent on what the legs do. And a big part of the pose initially for many people is learning the kicking action that is necessary to get you up and into a full handstand. So let's start to head in that direction now. A couple of key actions, key techniques we'll look at from downward facing dog pose. Let's work with the hands against the wall. You've got your fingers turned out and your thumb and index finger in contact with the wall. It gives you something more firmly to press against, more of a foothold, if you like, with the hands. So your wrists are shoulder width, your fingers are turned out, they're wider than shoulder width. Importantly, you have the tip of the thumb, each thumb, and the index finger touching the wall. Okay, and then press back to dog pose and bring your feet together so that your big toes and inner heels touch. Now we'll be keeping the left foot where it is to the floor whilst raising the right leg up. Now it might not be particularly clear the work of the right buttock involved in lifting the right leg up. Just to make it more clear, lift the heel higher. Feel how that right buttock, it needs to firm. Make sure your hips remain level as the right leg lifts. So the right buttock is firm. Make sure that the right kneecap is gripping. When it does, the right leg naturally lengthens. The back of the knee opens. Make sure that your heel is pointing directly upwards towards the ceiling. Toes are pointing straight down. Press your hands into the wall and lengthen out through the right leg. Make the distance as long as possible from the hands through to the right inner heel. Okay, and then let's have a rest down. So we'll come all the way down, knees to the floor and hips back to the heels. So of course, these preparatory poses that lead towards a handstand, they necessarily, by necessity, they are strengthening poses, strengthening the arms, strengthening the upper body, strengthening the buttocks, strengthening the leg muscles. Let's go to the left side now. Tuck your toes under, press back to dog pose, bring your feet together. Without the right hip dropping, raise the left leg up. Now important that the buttock is active so that the left leg feels very connected, very fused to the torso and the remainder of the body. We don't want there to be any disconnect there at all. Open the back of the left knee. Ensure that the left heel is pointing directly up. Try lifting the left heel still a bit higher towards the ceiling. Notice how the left buttock, it needs to activate in order to get the heel to lift. Okay, and then release down and have a rest for a moment in Virasana forwards. Okay, and now we're ready to think about the actual kicking action that will lead us towards a full handstand. Now, for these variations, it's probably good if I demonstrate them first, and then we can all
have a look and then work with them together. Initially, the distance that you'll be working with your hands away from the wall can feel more secure sometimes being closer to the wall, particularly when you're newer to this pose and just starting to learn the action of kicking up. But the best hand position will be with your fingertips a palm's width away from the wall. It's important because it will mean that you'll be able to look down at the floor between your hands. That's going to be very necessary when we get into the full pose. If your hands at this stage are closer to the wall, it's going to block that head position. Your head will get jammed into the wall. So fingertips a palm's width away from the wall. And then just have a look. At this stage, we're really just concerned with this simple hopping action. So I'm going to be taking my right leg just out of the way. So I'm lifting it up. I'm not so concerned with what the right leg is doing. I am concerned with what my left leg is doing. And it's just a simple hopping action. The knee bends and then I'm kicking off and landing with that same foot. Notice how when I kick off and land, the knee is bent and it absorbs the shock of coming down so that we don't come down with a big thump. And it also enables the spring action of being able to kick off the floor. Don't be too ambitious with how high you get at this stage. Even just 10 centimeters, half a foot or so. Let's just get used to that coordination of kicking off and landing with the same foot. We'll get to both of the feet. So let's start initially with the left foot doing the hopping. So the left foot, it needs to come in towards the center of the mat. If the foot's off to the side, when you kick it will then throw you off to the side. The right leg, raise it up. We'll get a little clearer shortly on exactly what the right leg does. For now, concentrate on the left foot. So the right foot, it stays off the floor, bend the left knee, and then kick off and land with the same foot. So you're kicking off and landing in exactly the same section of the mat. You've got time to have a few goes there. Try to control the coming down action by bending the knee just so that you absorb the shock of the body coming back to the floor. Okay, and then we'll change legs. So the right foot now, bring it towards the center of the mat. Have the left leg out of the way, just the toes lifted off the floor, and then that simple hopping action. Kick off and land with the same foot. Important, we don't want to try to kick off with one foot and land with the other foot. If you do, you'll come down with a big thump. Kick off and land with the same foot. Notice as you start to get more confident with it, you get a little bit, we could call it air time. A little bit more time with the body, with the feet off the floor. All right, so something that will help in terms of being able to get a little higher and getting more of that air time. And of course, in time, that hopping action, that springing action, it needs to get a little stronger, quite a bit stronger, so that it has enough grunt to be able to push the body up towards the wall. But it's only part of the action. Just as important is the momentum that can be gained from the top leg as it reaches up and towards the wall. If you can just see, as I visualize that with my arm, it's a really big arc that we're making, a real circular shape with the heel coming up in a circular position, circular action towards the wall. We need that in order to generate the centrifugal force to bring the pelvis towards the wall. So important that the knee of that leg is straight, so that leg can be as long as it can possibly be. The heel, don't think about bringing it to the wall, think about bringing it upwards more towards the ceiling. We need to go up in order to eventually come to the wall. Just have a look at how it works. So I'll come back to having my right leg off the ground. Same hopping action, but now I'm more consciously keeping that knee straight. And as I swing the leg, as I hop, I'm making a big, as wide a circular arc as is possible. And then I touch the wall that time, but that's our objective, to eventually, at your own pace, get that feeling of being able to touch the wall. I'm saying the wall, but really what I'm doing
is just lifting my heel upwards towards the ceiling. And that's the movement, the action that generates the force to move the pelvis towards the wall. Let's try it. So hands in position. Important that you're focusing on keeping your elbows straight. So often if you're a bit disorientated by the upside down position, as we all are initially, there can be that tendency for the elbows to buckle. That's when we run the risk of toppling to the side. So make sure as a priority movement, the movement that all the other instructions revolve around, that at all times you're keeping your elbows straight. And then position your feet. We'll have the left foot into the center of the mat. Raise the right leg up. Keep the knees straight. And then we're swinging with that leg as we hop off the floor, kick off and land with the same foot, making as big a circular arc as we can possibly make. The temptation to switch the feet over should be avoided. Kick off and land with the same foot. Now in time, you'll be touching the wall. For some people, that might take weeks, it might take months. For others, years. That's the direction you're heading in. Keeping the knee straight, big circular arc with the heel. Let's switch over. The expectation is when we switch over, one side will feel more comfortable, the other side more awkward. Let's just try to determine from this which is our preferred side, and then we'll, as we go further, we'll choose that side. Left leg lift up, keep the knees straight, bend the right leg and kick off and land with the same foot. Our objective to, in time, touch the wall with the heel at your own pace. More important at this stage that the knee is straight. Lead up with the heel, kicking the heel directly upwards towards the ceiling. Another couple of goes and then release, relax. In Uttanasana, let your head hang, let the breath settle, let the arms refresh. Just a couple of breaths there. And now just looking to the screen. So I'll first of all demonstrate what not to do or what you may be finding is the case. And then I'll have a look at some potential solutions to this problem. So very common is to stay understandably with your feet to the floor. And we sort of, even subconsciously, we don't want to quite give over to that feeling of being upside down. For that reason, our weight tends to come into the kicking foot and it stays there as we kick up. And it makes us very earthbound as we're trying to kick up. So a really good way of working around that is realizing that the action of kicking up, it's very much a rocking, weight transferring movement where, and just I'll describe it as I do it. So as I bend my kicking leg, my weight comes back into that foot, but then as I kick up, I transfer my weight to my hands. So from the kicking foot, transferring the weight to the hands, and at the point where my foot leaves the floor, my shoulders are over my wrists. They start back here though, so a bit like winding a spring up, and then transferring weight into the hands as we kick up. Let's give that a try. So hands in position. Make sure that you haven't got in too close to the wall. So fingertips a palm's width away from the wall. Let's now, rather than working with both sides, and in time, good if we can come back and work on both sides evenly, but just for the time being, let's choose the preferred side, the leg that feels most comfortable and natural leading you up to the wall. Have the kicking foot ready to go, the knee bent. The leg that's going to lead you up towards the wall, keep it straight at the knee, as we've been doing, making a big circular arc with the heel, lifting the heel straight up. But now look for that weight transfer from the kicking foot into the hands as you kick up. That rocking action from the kicking foot to the hands. Up and down, kicking off and landing with the same foot. Even that weight transfer, I can feel it in the hands as I do it, from the heel of the hand to the fingertips as we kick up. At that point of kick off, the fingertips pressing firmly down into the floor. Okay, just finish that attempt that you're on, and then come to Uttanasana, neck relaxing, head hanging. So it's very common at this stage to be having difficulty with this pose, a notorious pose in that respect. And I'll try to guide you through a couple of the things that can tend to be occurring. I've already mentioned one of them, and that is that we know that we're wanting to get to the wall. We fixate on that. We want to get to the wall as quickly as possible. I'll try to demonstrate it. And it looks like this, so that I'm hooking my leg back to the wall, and it means that I can touch the wall, which is good in a sense, but it doesn't enable me to generate any momentum with that leg to bring the remainder of my body up with the leg. So think of that centrifugal force. The other thing, if you watch me do it, you can see a real disconnect between my leg and my torso. And if I really notice it myself, the buttock as I kick up of this leading leg, it's not firm. So really helpful if we think of fusing that leg to the rest of the torso. So I'm consciously firming, gripping that right buttock, and then kicking up, and the momentum of that leg tends to bring the whole body towards the wall. This time, if you feel that you're more able to get the heel to make contact with the wall, the foot that's kicking you off the floor, feel free to start to bring it up towards the wall. Don't do it too quickly, otherwise you won't gain the momentum of the leading leg. It's a bit of a 1-2 action. The leading leg and then the kicking leg follows. Let's try it. So with your preferred leg leading, so you'll focus here eliminating that tendency for the knee to bend and for the foot to hook towards the wall. Think of touching the ceiling with the heel as you kick up and release down, kicking off and landing with the same foot. Let's go again. Kick off and land. Just to be really clear with it, raise the right leg up, or your leading leg, be it the right or the left, and then lift it higher so that you can really clearly feel that the buttock is working. And with the knees straight, then swing the leg up and release down. Have a rest for a moment. So and then just coming up and looking to the screen. So the other really common problem that we tend to have is that the force of kicking up, and just as I say it, I realize it is kicking up. It's not kicking towards the wall. This tends to happen as we kick up. The head and the shoulders move to the wall. And it doesn't mean then that the pelvis can come to the wall. The shoulders and head are coming to the wall. We need the pelvis to come to the wall. A good antidote for that is to put something like a bolster or your cushion against the wall, and it works a bit like a brake that blocks the ability of the shoulders to move in this direction. It contains the back ribs, and it allows the hips to come up and over and to the wall. I'll show what I mean. So hands in position, just having that bit of contact with the head against the bolster. It can be reassuring in terms of knowing where the wall is. Don't be tempted though to generate leverage to lift up by digging the head into the wall. Once you go down that path, often it can be a little bit hard to undo that action. So head's touching the wall, but just lightly touching the wall. The objective of the bolster is to prevent my shoulders and back ribs from coming to the wall as I kick up. So my pelvis comes to the wall, my back ribs kept away from the wall. Let's try it. So
Putting your bolster there, just the bottom of the bolster needs to be just a little bit away from the wall so that the bolster is not inclined to slide about or topple over as you kick up. Hands in position. For me, the hands were more or less in the position where they were, so with the fingertips a palm's width away from the wall. Might depend a little bit on the size of your bolster. If you've got a particularly thick bolster or cushion, you may need to bring your hands a little bit further out to allow for that. Head lightly touching the bolster, and just feel it. It gives you a bit of security. You know exactly where the wall is. Walk in, exhale, and kick up. We'll go a few times, working to bring both of the feet up to the wall. So the pelvis moves towards the wall and the back ribs away from the wall. Okay, let's have a brief rest, Uttanasana, neck release and the head hang. So this stage in the tutorial, there's an assumption that you're at this point able to kick up to the wall, and I'm aware that if you're just starting out, that might take some time to get to that point. So you're working at your own pace. Eventually you will be able to kick up to the wall, and then a couple of really common things that tend to occur when we do that. So head position, the correct head position at this stage is looking down at the floor there between the hands. That position of the head can tend to throw the chest out, forwards, away from the wall, and just the weight of the legs can tend to make the back of the pelvis drop to hang down onto the lower back. So rather than me demonstrating the incorrect way to do the pose, let's just look at a reclining variation that will give you a good sense of those actions that I'm describing there. So let's come down to lying on our back. Have your feet together, feet to the wall. And bring your arms up towards the vertical position. Have your palms facing the wall, elbows straight. So even though we're reclining here, as we would do in Shavasana, we're really thinking of this from the perspective of doing a handstand. So in a handstand, our arms are more or less vertical to the floor. So if we now bring them back and over the head, we're approaching that position relative to the remainder of the body. So keeping your elbows straight. Doesn't matter if the hands don't come all the way down to the floor. If you've got tighter shoulders and upper back, they probably won't. But notice the elbows coming down, they have that tendency to put a bigger curvature in the lower back, and as a result of that, the lower front ribs, they tend to lift upwards. Let's just keep the arms where they are. If you change your head position, so if you just briefly, we won't be there for a long time, but just briefly lift your head so that you can see towards your toes. Notice how your lower front ribs, they sit back down into the body. And as they do that, we can tuck the back of the pelvis under towards the wall, and then let the head settle back to the floor. And feel how we've just corrected that a little bit. The lower front ribs have moved back into the body. The back of the pelvis, it's moved away from the spine, comfortably so, away from the spine towards the feet. It might mean that you just a little bit need to loosen the knees. If you're locking the knees, often that can push the back of the pelvis in towards the remainder of the spine. Okay, and then just bring the arms back. So of course there's a natural curvature in the lumbar spine, and we don't want to eliminate that. We don't want to have a perfectly straight lumbar spine, but equally we want to make sure that we're not overarching, hanging into the lower back. And it can be quite an uncomfortable position to be in if you are needing that adjustment to the pose. Let's now come back to the full handstand. When we first come to the pose, looking down at the floor, and then in order to adjust the pose, we'll change the head position so that we look out into the center of the room. We'll bring the lower front ribs back into the body. Pressing the hands down, we'll lift the back of the pelvis up. And again, the legs, a bit like a handle for the pose, so that the legs are lifting the whole of the body in an upward direction towards the ceiling. Let's go. So hands in position. Once we've found that alignment, then we return our eyes back to where they now are at the floor there in between the hands. So walking in, shoulders over the wrists, exhale and kick up, and then changing the head position so that we're looking towards the center of the room, and your lower front ribs, move them into the body. Now the back of your pelvis, lift it upwards. Your tailbone, it moves into the body as you lift the back of the pelvis up. Now gripping the kneecaps, pressing down with the hands, use your legs to lift your spine upwards. Inner heels lift up, big toe bases lift up, and then turning the head back so that your eyes look down at the floor between your thumbs. Okay, and then release down. And our last time there, Uttanasana, back of the neck release, and the head hang. Okay, so I hope that's been assistance with your handstand, Adho Mukha Vrikshasana. Thank you for practicing with Yoga Selection.